Let's take a look at some basic facts of odd functions. So if a function is odd, like this picture here of x cubed graphed, it is symmetrical about the origin. That means you can rotate this picture 180 degrees and you get the original graph. Another way to think of rotating 180 degrees is to take a point, reflect it over the x-axis, and then reflect it over the y-axis. So for instance, if I start at this first point, which is 1, 1, and I reflect that over the x-axis, it would be right here, but then I also have to reflect that over the y-axis, so it would land right there. So that held true. Let's try one more point and see if that works. Let's try this one here at 2, 8. If I reflect that over the x-axis, that would be down here, right? And then if I reflect that over the y-axis, it would be right here. So that held true for those ordered pairs. Now let's talk about the ordered pairs on this graph. So I already named 1, 1, and then 2, 8. So if I start with 1, 1, what happens when I change the x value instead of positive 1, when I change it to its opposite, negative 1? Well, when I change it to its opposite, negative 1, my y-coordinate was negative 1. When I look at my x value here at positive 2, when I change that to the opposite, which is negative 2, it becomes negative 8, right? My y value is negative 8. So let's take a look at those observations. 1, 1, and then negative 1, negative 1. 2, 8, and then negative 2, negative 8. If I find a pattern between these pairs, maybe I could find the coordinates. If I use 3 to the third power is 27, I bet you could figure out what the y-coordinate would be if I change the 3 to a negative 3. So let's take a look at the previous two examples so we could figure out that missing y value. So again, for the previous examples, I started with positive 1, then I changed it to a negative 1. I started with positive 2, then I changed it to a negative 2. I start with positive 3, then I change it to a negative 3. So taking a look at the y values, this positive 1 y value became a negative 1 when you change the sign, right? This positive 8 became a negative 8. So that means this positive 27 would become a negative 27. So that means we can write a general rule looking at this observation. And here's what the rule says. When I plug in the opposite sign of x, right? When I plug in a negative value or the opposite sign of x. So again, f of negative x means plug in negative x, right? What happened when I plugged in the opposite sign of x? Instead of the positive value, I got the negative value, right? So when I plugged in negative x, I got negative f of x, the negative value. So let's take that rule and let's plug in one of these ordered pairs. So if I plug in negative 3 for x, what do I get? I get the opposite of f of 3. F of negative 3 was negative 27, and the opposite of f of 3 was 27, the opposite would be negative 27.